starts talking. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our third sponsor check-in for Summer Food Service Program 2025. I am Loria Hunter, the Education Administrator for the Summer Nutrition Programs here at the Department of Education. Today I have with me Ms. Lakeisha Love, who's an Education Specialist too, on the SUN program staff, and Mr. Ben Guthrie, who is a retired state employee who has rejoined us on the SUN program staff. In addition, today we have a guest from Myers and Stauffer, which is the auditing firm that will be conducting your administrative reviews in the Summer Food Service Program, Clay Harden. So Clay, welcome to our webinar this beautiful Friday afternoon, and thank you for coming. I just
Thank you
wanted
for
to,
having me.
well, we're delighted that you're here, and hopefully you can answer a lot of questions that will come up today about ARs. So I would just like to go over our agenda briefly. We are going to review the overall admin review process, why it's important, the purpose of having the admin review. Ms. Lakeisha Love will cover that portion of today's agenda. We have a top review findings that we'd like to share with you, and that's going to be conducted by Clay from Myers and Stauffer's. The process for the unannounced visits will also be covered by Clay. Ben Guthrie will talk about document requirements, and then I will finish out the meeting reviewing the final report and the DocuSign items that will come along with that final report. So we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of getting you guys started on your weekend and ending up this Friday. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Lakeisha.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Lakeisha Love. Many of you know me. I'm going to discuss the SFSP Administrative Review Overview. So I'm just going to give you a brief description. It's just a few slides of basically what the purpose of the administrative review is. So the purpose and process. The reviews ensure financial operations are conducted properly, financial statements,
Lakeisha,
and yes,
may
ma'am.
I interrupt? Are you wanting to share your screen or not?
I will. I can.
Okay.
I will go ahead. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the sponsored administrative review, purpose and process. The purpose of the review is to ensure financial operations are conducted properly, financial statements and reports are correct, and the expenditures of program funds comply with federal regulations. Both sponsored and site reviews must be conducted. So the administrative review, there's a USDA selection process, which includes sponsors are reviewed every 3 years, sponsors in the first year of operation. Also, sponsors with 20 or more sites must be reviewed. One half of the total program reimbursements for the prior year, or 10% of the sites must be reviewed. So the ALSDE administrative review process, you must be prepared to be reviewed at any time during program operation. Be mindful that all SFSP reviews are unannounced. Have all documents available for review. And one of the most important is have an individual who can assist the reviewer or auditor in the event the highest ranking official is unavailable on the day of review. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. We're going to turn it back over to you, Ms. Loria.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Clay, will you share some of the top review findings based on what you and your staff have found as you go out to the reviews for the summer feeding program?
Yes, let me just get my screen shared for you all quickly. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Got it.
All right. And so just going over some of the top review findings that we've seen in the past. You know, these are common findings. It's not necessarily everything. You know, starting at the top. And if everybody could mute their microphone, if they're not, I think we're getting some feedback noise. Starting at the top with meal count variance. So this is an issue we see quite a bit, and am pretty excited that hopefully this will be going down. I think a lot of meal count variance kind of also comes from the second item, right? Meal tally error. Those tally sheets, marking everything manually, having to then, you know, count all those up, write the number, get the number off each one of those daily sheets for each site, and add them all together. You know, you're talking about a calculation of thousands of places for human error, and certainly understandable that we see those minor variances on a regular basis. Now, this year, with the implementation of some more tools to allow you guys to use some electronic meal counting documents, and then in the future, where that document can hopefully be directly linked into your claim. We hope to, you know, see a large reduction in number of those meal count variance errors by getting you guys these tools. So, you know, there's still going to be some room for that to happen. Just make sure, you know, you're double checking everything when it comes to adding up all of all of your meal counts, submitting your claim until it is enabled where those electronic counts can be directly put into the claim system. Then on the meal tally error, besides just kind of what I talked about, the human error of adding things together, I think the main thing we see there is either the number of tally marks on the sheet didn't match up to the total number, and again with the electronic, that should be going away. I believe state approval is going to be required for anybody still using tally sheets. So also make sure that you have approval for that if you are not able to upgrade to the new electronic system. But if you do get approval for that, you know, make sure that you're putting an individual tally mark in each box. You're not writing a line across the entire row, and that those number of tick marks add up to the total number of meals served you write at the bottom of the sheet. And like I said, with this new electronic system, highly encourage everybody to move to that, to make your life easier, and hopefully avoid some of, you know, these errors that we see. Nobody wants that. Serving days not matching the application. I think this was a big one that came around with the advent of non-congregate. Certainly understand there's been some confusion in the past, and rightfully so, right? You want to accurately show the number of days that represent the meals you're giving out. So you want to try to mark all of those, but also you're only serving, you know, maybe 1-2 days a week if you're doing bulk meals. So on that, I know there's a new application system this year. There's going to be a calendar where you're marking all the days that represent the meals you've been given out, but that's not necessarily the days that you all are serving if you're doing bulk non-congregate. So if you are doing bulk non-congregate, make sure to work with your ed specialist. There should be a comment field where they are having you enter in the actual days that you will be serving. Laura, if there's anything you want to jump in on that, anything I missed there, please feel free to let me know.
You're good.
All right. Site caps is another issue that we've come across. Certainly, we understand that the site cap that you're putting in your application is a best guess. Even if you've been operating for a while, there could be changes that cause either a reduction or increase in the number of participants. So that's why it's really important as you're going through to be thinking about what your site cap is and comparing that to, what you're actually seeing for participation on a day-to-day basis. By the time you're a week or two into serving for the summer, you should have a pretty good idea of what that number is. If the site cap that you applied for, significantly higher, say you had a site cap of 500 and there's been, around 150 kids showing up the first 2 weeks, the odds are is you're not going to get up to that 500 number. Please, go into your application, submit a revision for a lower number. You don't have to bring it all the way down to that 150. You can leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room, right? Something reasonable, maybe set it to 170, but just keep watching that. And then conversely, maybe your site cap is too low. Historically, there hasn't been a ton of participation, but you did some really good marketing this year, and the first couple weeks come out and wow, there's way more kids than your site cap. Obviously, you're going to be limited by the number of meals you prepare to start with, but you can also, you know, increase that as you're going. And so if you're seeing more kids than the site cap you're approved for, please submit a revised claim, or not reclaim, but a revised application requesting an increase. You're probably on that side of things. For an increase, you're going to want it approved pretty quickly, just so there's no confusion with the reviewer. So you may want to specifically reach out to your ed specialist after you have submitted that revision and let them know, hey, I've submitted this in case it's not flagging for you. Could you go in and review this? Let me know if this is reasonable. Until you get that approved, we don't want, to see you turning kids away. The site cap is a limit as far as the claim goes, but if you've got a site cap of 200, you happen to have 220 meals prepared because you saw you were kind of creeping right up on that 200 number, by all means serve the kids. We don't want any participants, any children turned away, going home hungry for the program. But do understand that if you serve over that cap on the particular day, you can only claim up to that cap. You can still give those meals out. If you are actually serving them, you can claim the expenses for those meals. Just make sure you're getting that increase noted pretty quickly in your application if you see that you're trending over it. Another one we see quite a bit is unallowable expenses. It has come down a little bit in the last few years. I think the whole grain-based dessert issue from SFSP, CACFP kind of several years ago, there was a lot of different regulations that came in that kind of caught some people out. I think we've seen everybody up to date on those and don't see a ton of those. I would say, a lot of them are, again, just kind of human error, maybe something you didn't think about that snuck in there. So just try to be diligent, each month reviewing your expenses. If you see something that isn't allowable, maybe you had a day where you were doing a fun extra cake for the site supervisor's, birthday to celebrate with the kids, right? You can serve that in addition to all of your credible items, but it wouldn't be an allowable expense. Sometimes it may get put on the same card by accident. So just make sure you're reviewing all of your invoices. At the end of the month, if you catch that, note it, make a deposit back into your account with non-program funds, and just note, hey, we made this unallowable purchase. We caught it. We put it back in here. It may still be a finding in the review for using it, but there won't be any disallowance when it comes to review time. Milk shortage is another one that we see. And again, I think we see meals being served with milk almost all the time. We don't see a ton of issues with the serving of the milk. I think it comes a lot into the documentation piece, especially if you're operating multiple programs. Make sure that you have a really good process that it is clear what milk is being purchased for which program, so it can be compared. When we run into these milk shortage issues, often we find that it's probably not an issue of you not having enough milk. It's your ability to demonstrate in a review that you had enough milk throughout the month. And then budgeted cost. This is probably where unallowable expenses comes in the most. Things that maybe not necessarily are truly unallowable. They're allowed within program regulations. However, you were not either budgeted for the amount that you expensed, or you just weren't budgeted in that category at all. So just be very mindful during the budgeting process, what you're going to need for the program, what you're going to be expensing with program funds. And then when you move into the operation period, make sure that you're referencing back to that budget and you're following it. Things come up that need to be purchased. So you can continue to work with your specialist if something comes up and you need to try to get it budgeted, or think back to your financial viability. It may not get approved even if you ask for it, but if something comes up that's required for program operation, part of your application is that you said that you would be able to cover any program shortfalls with external funds. So make sure you're keeping all those things in mind to try to avoid some of these top issues that we see. Now we're going to look at the SFSP administrative review, kind of have it broken down into the two types of reviews that take place. So there are site reviews. This includes reviews of the actual site where participants are being served. This also includes any central kitchens, any self-prep central kitchens, any of your FSMC kitchens. We go out to review them as well per program regulations. All of those will be unannounced at all times for obvious reasons. On the review side, that's kind of the only way for us to be able to see what's actually going on. On the sponsor review side, they can be announced or unannounced. Historically, they have been unannounced. We'll probably continue to do that, but we may be piloting some announced. And on that, I think it's always best just to be prepared for, they say be prepared for the worst case scenario or the toughest scenario, right? I think unannounced is probably going to be the most difficult on you. So if you're always ready for that to happen, then you're going to be ready for one that's announced. So just always be prepared that it could happen anytime. The site reviews obviously would be taking place during program operation, but sponsor reviews, the documentation related to your claim and expenses, even if you're not operating year round, just be reminded that by program federal regulations, any time within 3 years of a claim, documentation can be requested for that. So just know where your stuff is at all times and be prepared to provide it. I know that can be tough when you're not operating. You may be moved on to other things, but just make sure that if you have everything organized, while it may be a little difficult after program operation, if you have everything organized, filed away, you can quickly get to it and direct your auditor to it with minimal interruption. And just talking through the process of the site review, a reviewer is going to arrive generally around 30 minutes before meal service. And this is super important for your meal service times, not only on program regulation that you have to serve within your meal service time, but if you're serving ahead of your meal service time, say your time is from noon to 1, the reviewer is probably going to plan to show up about 11:30. If you serve all your meals at 11, not only are you going to be having some disallowance there for serving outside of your time, but you serve so far out of your time that to the reviewer, they never really saw anybody. So that even, brings a larger question, bad look on your part into it. So just make sure that you're adhering to your meal service times, that you're updating applications if there's any reason for those to change throughout the year, that it's very obvious to whoever may be coming out what time the site is serving for each meal. So there's no appearance that something's going on that's not. Once we're there, going to observe the meal service, look at all the required licensure, that may be required based on how what the particular site is. There's a lot of those, so I won't go into all of those details. And then at the end, conduct an exit conference with the site supervisor. It's usually pretty quick, and just going over, what we noticed, any technical assistance, any findings that were cited. And then those will also be provided to the sponsor at the end of the review as well. So if you're a sponsor, you're gonna get to find out what's going on with your sites. So just an extra level of monitoring you guys get to see. Then the administrative review process as far as sponsors go, in an introduction, provide a records request checklist. Obviously, if it's on site, that'll be a sheet handed to you, a conversation that's had when we get there. If it is, announced, that may be provided ahead of time, or if it's some type of modified desk review, you may receive that through email. Again, always be prepared that someone could show up at any time. Even when doing hybrid desk reviews, for the overall population, there's a mix of, who may be desk reviewed, who may be on site. None of it's targeted at anybody. It's kind of a random mix, just because that's good audit procedure, right? I know you guys kind of like to know what's coming, but from a program compliance side of things, that's the easiest way to catch those unfortunate bad apples that make it tough on the rest of you guys. We know 99% of the people participating in this program all want to do the right thing or coming at it from the right place. But unfortunately, we have to do our procedures based on those 1% that don't want to do it right. We'll review the documentation while we're on site, or once it's been submitted, remotely. We'll do any follow-up requests, ask questions about documentation. Hey, looks like this is missing. Can you explain what's going on here? Is there some additional documentation that I need, that further explains this? And then once we've been through that, giving you a reasonable, amount of time to provide any follow-up documents, we will conclude wrapping up our findings in our review and conduct an exit conference. At the sponsor level, we'll let you know the sponsor findings, but also update you on any findings that we had or lack thereof. Hopefully there's none, at the site level, and provide any technical assistance that we came across. And that is all I have on the site review process and top findings.
Okay, great. Thank you, Clay. That was very thorough. Mr. Guthrie, will you discuss some of the document requirements?
I sure will. And as Clay mentioned early on, a lot of these documents, a lot of these findings that he mentioned, these have been repeat findings for the last several years. But I would like to encourage everyone to review, if you don't have a copy of it, it's on Break for the Plate, our record checklist. We have a checklist of all the records that you will be required to maintain. Now, a lot of these records will be downloaded in the online application, but there's a lot of records that will be done each day that you operate, and you'll need to have those records readily available. And also, one thing I'd like to point out is always make sure that you have someone in your organization that can have access to these records in the event that you're not available on the day that the review takes place. And one thing you got to remember is that the reviews will be taking place on a day that you show in your application that you've been approved to operate. So make sure if you know you're going to be out of town or if you're going to be out, someone in your organization can have access to those records in order to where the auditors can come in and do the jobs. Uh, if you noticed in his first two issues there, it had something to do with meal counts, which your meal count variance. Make sure in your meal tally errors, make sure your meal count records are available. Make sure that you have them readily available for the previous 5 days, because that's what they're going to be looking at. Also, you need to make sure if you have any closed enrolled sites, make sure that you have the income eligibility applications available, and of course the enrollment records. Also, you want to make sure that you have your menus and production records available, because they will be reviewing those for the previous days, not only on the day of the review, but on the previous days, prior to the review, they'll be looking at that. Any all delivery receipts on all food items, make sure that you got those records available. And of course, your training, all your training documentation that you've done with your staff, make sure that those records are available, as well as your monitoring records, because monitoring is an important function of the summer food service program. So you'll need to demonstrate that you've met that requirement by producing those documents that show that you did your required monitoring. Um, and then, of course, your financial records. Uh, Make sure that your financial records are available. Everything that you've purchased from food, from any of the approved items on your budget, make sure you have documentation to support that. If you spent money on any items whatsoever that's been approved, make sure you've got those records available, because they will be looking at that. Um, and of course, as far as your procurement documentation, if you've everything that you required to do in order to procure food, make sure that you have that information available, because they will be looking at it. And I think I've covered everything, but once again, make sure that you got that list. If you keep that list handy and go down that list and check off all the records, and if you've got them all, then you should be in good shape. I think that's it, Gloria.
All right. Thank you, Ben. So if you guys have questions, you can start putting those in the chat and we can go through those at the end. I am going to share my screen and prepare to talk about the final report requirements once the AR is done. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, thank you. All right, so now that you've submitted your application, it's been approved, you're up and running, Myers and Stauffer shows up, conducts their review, they will send a report to us at the state agency. And once we receive that report, we review it, we do a second quality review on it. And once we finish that quality review, we will send you a DocuSign envelope. In that DocuSign envelope, you will have your findings letter. You'll have the sponsor review signed document, the site review signed document, notice of serious deficiency, if applicable, your kitchen review or the food service management review, a corrective action template, the appeal procedures, and some miscellaneous attachments in that DocuSign envelope might include a non-inclusion of meals form and a revised claim. So just to be clear, not everyone will receive all of these attachments. It's really based on the findings. So if you had findings that did not rise to the level of a serious deficiency, you will not have a notice of serious deficiency as part of your attachments in the DocuSign envelope. So the findings letter, I put a little snip on this slide, which I know you can't see, but your findings letter will look very similar to this. Each one of the findings that was identified during your review will appear on that findings letter. In addition to the findings, there will be a section on that letter that has corrective action. So it's primarily leading you and guiding you towards what you need to do to make sure that finding is correct. If you had findings that resulted in an overpayment, that overpayment amount will be included in the findings letter. And also there will be a directive in that letter indicating that you have 7 days to return the corrective actions. And I just want to emphasize here that don't wait for the findings letter to appear in your DocuSign box before you start working on the caps, because as you can see from, you have 7 days to get that, to turn that corrective action plan and supporting documents to return that to us for review. That's a really short period of time. So I would recommend taking full advantage of when the auditors are on site and they're going over those findings with you, to start thinking about how you plan to correct those and to actually start putting plans in motion to come up with your corrective actions shortly after the auditors leave. Don't wait until you get the letter, please, because it just compresses the time so much that it makes it hard for you to be able to turn it around as quickly. On the sponsor review and the site review, I've depicted here on this slide what that looks like. This is actually the sponsor review, and it's just a summary of the findings at the sponsor level. On the right-hand side, you will have the findings, a summary of the findings on the left-hand side, and on the right, there will be recommendations for corrective action. You notice that this part of the form is signed. And part of the reason for that signature is to support the fact that you were aware of the findings at the end of the review. So that is a good signal for you to start working on those and to, it's not our intent to catch you doing something wrong. It's not our intent to be the police, but we do have to have documentation that you were advised or informed of what the findings are. And this is a good document to support that, that all of that information was reviewed with you. And not only is it beneficial to you, but it's beneficial to us as a state agency and for the audit firm that's providing this information to you. The site review form will look very similar to the sponsor review form. It does have a spot for signature and date as well. The next item is the serious deficiency notice. And again, that will only be included in the DocuSign envelope if you had findings that rise to the level of serious deficiency. There are several things that can result in the serious deficiency notice, and that is submission of false information, failure to operate your program in a financially viable way, that you should also ensure that you have the administrative capability and accountability for the program. And if during a review you're found to not be operating based on those criteria, that could result in a notice of serious deficiency. Another example of what will trigger a notice of serious deficiency is a failure to maintain adequate records. That could be meal counting records, that could be financial records, it could be production records, just it's an overall kind of encompassing option as it relates to maintaining the adequate records. Claiming reimbursement for meals not served to children, that's a big one. There are times when meals are claimed for adults, or it could be program adults and non-program adults, and that is not the intent of the program. So you can serve those meals to people, but you cannot claim them for reimbursement, and you have to have another source for paying for those meals as well. It cannot come out of your summer feeding reimbursement, especially for the non-program adults. If you want to provide meals for the staff who are working the summer feeding program, you sure can do that. They have to be associated with the actual production side of the program, and you will not get reimbursed from those meals served, but it could be considered a perk or a benefit for working with the program. Non-program adults, for sure, cannot be claimed for reimbursement, and you have to have another source of funds to be able to provide for the payment of those meals. Another item that can result in the notice of serious deficiency is claiming reimbursements for meals that don't meet the requirements. Clay sort of touched on that when he was talking about milk and not having the documentation to support the amount of milk that should have been purchased to accompany the meals that you're claiming for reimbursement. If you're missing a component on a day where you are claiming meals for reimbursement, that's also an issue. So these are just a few of the items that can result in a notice of serious deficiency. This is not an all-inclusive list. Another attachment that will be included on your DocuSign envelope is the kitchen review or the food service management company review. And that review will cover general sanitation questions. They will ask for your permit to operate, document if it's within the allotted approval time. If it has expired, of course, that will be an issue. But we have you send that information in to us as part of your application. So hopefully with that review and with your reviewing on site, that having an expired permit will not be an issue for you. They will also ask to see your health inspection report. Please be advised that if you have a finding on your health inspection report that was written up by the health inspector, you need to have some documentation on file to indicate that you have followed up with correcting that item that needed to be corrected. So it's just not good enough to accept the score of 95 and there was an issue regarding the dumpster lids not being closed. So you need to have something in writing to document that you followed up on that finding. They will also look for food and equipment temps. You do need to have a process in place for recording your food temperatures. And if you're storing food on site, to record the temperatures of the equipment, maintaining the temperature of those foods. If you're transporting food, they will also have questions, or there will be questions on that form regarding food transport. Is the vehicle clean? Are you following the safety and sanitation requirements for transportation? They will do an on-site review of your food preparation process, a menu analysis, again, looking at your production records, complete and accurate and up-to-date production records, and the milk analysis. So once we again get that report from Mars and Stauffer along with their supporting documentation, we get the final report done, you get your letter. Included in that DocuSign envelope will be a corrective action plan template. The corrective action plan template looks very similar to the one that I have listed here on the screen. And we will be asking you to, on this corrective action template, what was the finding? Why did the finding take place? Who's going to be responsible for correcting it and the date it's going to be corrected? And we're going to ask you to list the steps that you've put in place to make sure this finding is permanently and accurately corrected. All of that information will need to be put on this template. And in addition to that, we'll be asking you to provide supporting documentation. So if you had a finding that your monitoring was not taking place, and we want to know what your plans are for correcting that, when you corrected it, if you had training to correct it, if you did an on-site review, whatever the process was, we need documentation. Of course, the low-hanging fruit is if you have training, we will need an agenda of that training and a sign-in sheet. That will be your supporting document that you address that finding issue of the site monitoring. So just keep in mind, every corrective action will require a supporting document. And also included in that DocuSign package is the appeal procedures, and the appeal procedures will go out actually with every document we send. And I think it's just a make sure that we have flooded the zone with getting the information out to everyone who needs it. Of course, if you had no findings or if you had findings that not all findings can be appealed anyway, but if you have a finding that you know you're not going to appeal, this is not as important as in some situations where sponsors have findings that they felt were unfair or that they need to appeal. And again, not all findings are appealable, but the procedures are there. And it's important that if you are going to appeal, that we need something in writing. The hearing officer needs something in writing in 14 calendar days from the date of receipt of the a DocuSign envelope. So, and you will have to follow up your appeal process with supporting documentation, written documentation. So, why you're claiming the appeal, why you're filing the appeal, and what issue that, what documents you're providing to support your appeal. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, again, put it in the chat, but you can also email us at sfsp@alsde.edu. We do have a new phone number now that we have an administrative assistant, and that number is 334-694-4660. So I just wanted to summarize a few points I have before we turn it over for questions. But if I want the thing that I really want to impress upon the new sponsors in particular, but for the returning sponsors too, the application that you send in to us is very, very detailed. So much of what you need to do to prepare for the program, you've already done once the application is submitted to us. Just execute that plan and become very familiar with what you said you're going to do. So if you have to change anything, if it doesn't go according to plan, make sure you send in a revision. And you send that revision in using the online application. For instance, as Clay was talking about the changes in the level of students or the number of students a number of children that you're serving, if that starts to fluctuate, you need to send in a change. If you have to close a site, you're planning because of declining participation, you need to send in a revision. So be very familiar with your plan of action, with your management plan, with your application. And if you have any changes to that, to send in a revision and send it in as soon as you know or aware of an issue or a change. It doesn't have to be an issue, but when you're aware of a change, that will keep you from being cited for things that are very easy to do, and it will also keep you from having to respond to that finding on an AR because every finding, again, everything they write as a finding, you will have to respond to with a corrective action plan and supporting documentation. And some of these things are really easy to not land on that final report. I would also encourage you to ask questions if you don't know something or if you're unsure about something. This is a highly regulated program. It seems that I know sometimes we think, well, it's common sense that the tiny kids coming through are not going to eat as much as the bigger kids. We have one meal pattern for summer feeding. So it doesn't matter if you have a 4-year-old coming through with an 18-year-old, they get the same portions. You can't start decreasing the portion sizes arbitrarily for the little kids. You can always give more. That's not the issue. But when you start decreasing portion sizes, that will land you into some issues as well. So that's about all I have, just kind of summarizing what we've talked about today. And I know that's a lot of information, and I thank you for your indulgence and hearing us drawn on and on about it. But I did want to ask Clay, if I can put you on the spot for a little bit, Clay, if you can give some examples of some unallowable costs that you talked about earlier. I know that sometimes get to be a huge finding where sponsors think they can purchase things under summer feeding, but it is not an allowable cost to the summer feeding program.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I think kind of a lot of it does come down to probably like you talked about some common sense stuff. So I think that's the first place I would start as far as most anything that's like allowable or unallowable just in the program in general. You can't be purchasing a beach condo with funds, right? You know, it's always easy to throw out those crazy things we've seen before. But then I think where probably trips more people up than unallowable, truly unallowable within, you know, the program, right? Federal regulation says XYZ is allowable, but it's got to be approved either the amount or just that cost category period. And in your application with the state. So I think labor is a big one, and making sure that you're matching up, even if you do get approved for labor, that you're matching up, like she said, become familiar with what you applied for. You know, if you applied that the cook is getting paid $12 an hour, you know, right? Maybe they're doing a great job, and halfway through the summer, you want to give them a raise to $14 an hour. You can do that, but we're going to review as far as what can be paid with SFSP funds at the $12 an hour. So just know, like any of those raises, unless you're getting some type of approval from your application specialist or from the state and saving that approval, you can pay them more, you know, at any point during the summer, but those funds are going to have to come from some other source, and you're going to have to show how that's coming from another source. I think that's a pretty good example of even something that's allowable and approved in the budget, but how you need to make sure that you're really looking at what's approved in the budget. Same with number of hours per day is another one that gets tripped up. You know, you may get approved for 5 days for your cook, 6 hours a day. So, you know, you do the math, it's I don't have Excel. Just because I'm an accountant doesn't mean that I'm good off the top of my head. But 30 hours, if I'm wrong, you can all laugh at me. But you know, 30 hours for the full week. But that still has to be broken up at 6 hours a day on the timesheet. So if they work, you know, 8 hours one day, and then 4 hours, or on Monday 8 hours, 4 hours on Wednesday, 6 the rest of the week, it still comes out to that 30. You're going to have to make sure that you're really reducing what you can pay with SFSP down by 2 hours, because that extra 2 hours from Monday can't offset the two less hours from Wednesday. So that's an example on labor, and make sure you're understanding what's being approved with your administrative versus operational labor. Make sure you're keeping timesheets. I think that's a big thing, especially if they are splitting between things. Maybe your cook, if you're operating, you know, both CFP and SFSP, if your cook's doing both, make sure that time's being split out. Or if you're, you know, like a boys and girls club, some type of community organization, and the cook prepares meals for some summer camp outside of this program that you're running, but they're also preparing meals for this, that all that is split out and documented, and we can follow.
What if the cook is not splitting time? What if the cook is just with SFSP? Does he or she need a timesheet?
Yes, you're still going to need a timesheet, but obviously it doesn't have to be, you know, there doesn't have to be a split documented. I think that's the main thing, is if they're always going to have a timesheet, but if they're doing multiple duties, so basically, especially if you're approved for, you know, less than 8 hours a day, you know, make sure that timesheet is showing those different duties that they're doing.
And I just want to say this, Ms. Lakeisha and Ben, please chime in. Don't be shy. Include your feedback. But Myers and Stauffer, when they come
And
out, they are strictly business. They are going to get it done. So when we come out at the state agency, we are going to be more relational. That's not a slight to Myers and Stauffer, but we know we have relationships with you guys that they don't have. So our approach is going to be different. When they show up and they ask for documents, they're going to be wanting those documents within a couple of hours. So if you're not ready when they show up, that's probably not going to be a very good review. So just make sure that I had an assistant superintendent who would say to me, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And that is so true when it comes to summer feeding. So just make sure as you're starting the program that you are, again, true to what you said you were going to do on that application, that you're following up with your staff, that you're visiting your sites, and that those sites are running just as you indicated on the application they would. You'll be in good shape. But the documentation is critical. And they will be showing business cards. I think Clay may have mentioned that. They don't have badges, but will be showing their business cards to you as they show up. For those of you who don't know if you're going to have a review, you can kind of figure it out. If you haven't had a review in 3 years, you're probably going to get a review this year. If you have more than 20 sites, you're probably going to get a review this year. If you're starting to do non-congregate, you're probably going to get a review this year. So just start planning based on that. If I missed any other categories, somebody chime in and let me know.
If you're seriously deficient from last year, you will receive another follow-up review this year as well. And Miss Lori, we have a question in the chat.
Okay.
One of the sponsors is requesting to go over the pay scale info again. And I'm assuming, Clay, that is responding to you in your statements.
yes, and I guess I'm not entirely sure what you mean by pay scale. If you want to come off mute and let me know, but there's no set. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys. On your application side, some states do have a set pay scale. So maybe this is a multi-state sponsor asking. Um, I don't believe there's any set pay scale in Alabama outside of what you get approved for in your application. So it's got to be approved in your application and whatever that amount for each particular employee is. And if you're looking for something else, let me know.
I think that answers my question. This is Ruth in Crenshaw. I had a phone call while you were discussing that, so I missed the first part of it. So there's no set amount. You just said something about $12 and it caught my attention, and I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I was throwing that out there as an
I got you.
example. I
So if
certainly
it's
certainly
approved in the
appreciate you.
application, then we can pay it out of SFSP.
Yes, and just be aware, right? You know, for any reason you give them a raise, you can give them a raise, but anything over what's approved is going to have to come from another source unless you get, you know, like a budget revision approved for the raise. I've seen that before, so that's why I throw
I
that
got
out
you.
as an
All right.
example.
Thank you.
So, Ben, will you share the example of why the compensation plan and the issue with the end of year raises? What sort of triggered some of this? Am I putting you on the spot?
Oh, no, your compensation plan is basically what you're identifying that each employee that'll be working in the summer feeding program, what their rate of pay will be. So you need to make sure what you're paying those employees for working in the summer feeding program is what you have identified in the compensation plan. That compensation plan will be downloaded into the online application. And that's generally what the auditors are going to be looking at when they're going to uh, refer on the amount of salary or hourly wage that employee is being paid. They're going to go back and see if that matches the compensation plan. Did that pretty much cover that, Clay?
Yes, yeah, that
Okay.
that covered that compensation plan is what we're going to be using.
And I think another thing too that it seems like, and it's been 2 years since I've been really heavily involved with the summer feeding program. But one thing I would remember a lot of times being at work and getting a call from the auditors that they're at a location in order to do a review, and there's nobody available. And keep in mind, if you've been approved to operate on any given day, it's going to be on your application. Those are the days that the auditors are going to be looking at where they'll come. Now, if you show that you're not going to be operating, you're going to be off a week. I'm not speaking for Clay, but chances are you probably won't get reviewed that week if you show that you're not operating that week, or you're going to be out of the office that week, whatever. But if you show that you're going to be operating the summer feeding program, you better be ready.
Yeah, and that's to clarify, that's from the unannounced site review side. The sponsor review could come at any point, operating day, non-operating day. I'm not coming out there on Saturday and Sunday for a sponsor review, so you don't have to worry about that for me. I can't speak for Lori or Ben if they want to get out there on a I don't think they do either, but yeah,
No, we
just
don't.
keep in mind that operation in those days that we're talking about is related to the site review, and that sponsor reviews could come after program operation, or if you're doing bulk non-congregate, you only operate on Tuesdays. There could be somebody come to the sponsor location on Thursday, or email you, call you, making a request if it's a desk review hybrid type situation. That could come at some time too. But again, like Lori said, just always be prepared. The unannounced on site is always the most difficult. You don't want to start building your tornado shelter once the sirens are already going off. So just be prepared for the worst.
Ruth, you have a question?
Well, I was just going to share a tip, if that's okay, Loria.
Sure.
So my good friend Randy, who's also a fellow CMP director, shared this with me at conference. One year I got caught for a review and I was gone, had just moved my office. And so the files were there, but where they were, no one knew. Took us a little while to find them, but he said, put it on a zip drive. When you go out of town for meetings, when you go anywhere. So we do two things. We don't only put it on a zip drive, but it's also in a shared Google folder or Microsoft Teams folder where everyone that's available can get to it, including my manager. So, and that's been very, very beneficial to Crenshaw County Schools.
Thank you for that. That's a wonderful tip. Absolutely. Okay. So I don't want to hold you guys. It seems like we have exhausted our talking points here, but if you do have questions, now is the time to ask. Miss Ruth, do you still have another question? Nope. Okay.
Here you go, location.
Questions? Okay, well, thank you guys for joining us today. Clay, thank you so much. The information you provided was absolutely on point and enlightening. I learned some things myself as well. If you guys would like this, actually, we are recording this, so we will be putting it on our website, breakforaplate.com/summer. So you can go back and listen to this again if you need to. And if, again, no questions, I'm going to say have a good Friday and have a good weekend, and thank you for joining us.